Today on Inside Utah Politics, Medicaid expansion. What's next now that the federal government said it will not approve the latest waiver? State leaders and advocates have different ideas on that. We're breaking it down. Plus, Utah County launching a pilot program to increase voting opportunities for residents living out of state. The county clerk is here to explain how it works.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Good Sunday morning, and thanks so much for joining us for Inside Utah Politics. I'm Glenn Mills. We begin this morning with Medicaid expansion in Utah. Under SB 96, the bill that modified Proposition 3, the state was asking the federal government to pay 90% of the cost for expanding Medicaid to 100% of Utahns at or below the federal poverty level. HHS informed the state that that waiver would be denied. That means the feds will continue paying 70% for the time being. SB 96 does have a fallback to expand to 138% of the FPL and a 90-10 split, but that doesn't happen until next year. We're digging deeper into the issue with Representative Jim Dunnigan, the House sponsor of SB 96, and Matt Sloniker with Utah Health Policy Project, a local advocacy group. Gentlemen, so glad to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
Representative Dunnigan, let's start with you. Now that the waiver, you've been told it would not be approved by HHS, what's next?
Well, let me just first say, where does that leave people that are currently in Medicaid expansion? And we're talking about adults. Children are already eligible, so we're only talking low-income adults, and nothing changes for them. Those that are signed up, we have about 34,000 Utahns that are on Medicaid expansion since April 1. Nothing changes, and the doors are open. There's no caps, there's no work requirements for this year. Just come on and get covered. So the most important thing we could probably do today is tell people that nothing has changed.
That's a good point, and I did want to get into that. So let's go ahead and keep on that now before we get into what's next. Matt, let's bring you in. What are you guys doing working with people that come to you and have these questions?
Absolutely. So Utah Health Policy Project, the organization that I work for, has an outreach and enrollment program that actually helps people enroll in health insurance, whether it's Affordable Care Act insurance, Medicaid, or CHIP. And what we've been doing is getting out there into the public, making sure that people understand that Medicaid expansion is an opportunity. And yeah, it has been confusing. You know, what happened during session? What happened last November? Do we have Medicaid expansion? Do we not have Medicaid expansion? With this latest news, we're worried again that the public may be a bit confused. But to clarify, I'm 100% behind what Representative Dunnigan is saying. We need to get the word out that you can enroll in Medicaid expansion. We've frankly been a little dissatisfied with how many people have enrolled, and we want to get out there and make sure folks really understand that they can reach out to us as an agency and to Medicaid and DWS and get enrolled.
I've been a little surprised by the enrollment numbers too. They've been lower than what I thought they would be. That program, if I remember right, became eligible April 1st. Your thoughts on why not as many people as we might have thought are enrolling?
Well, there's a couple of reasons at least. One is we have a great economy. I mean, if we were going into an economic downturn, I expect we'd have a lot more people enrolled. So a lot of people can get coverage through their employers, but there are many that cannot. And we thought it would be a ramp up. Mm-hmm. It's slower than we thought, but with so much of the debate going on within our state and nationally, I think people were perhaps confused, which is why that's the message I want to carry today is if you are eligible and you want it, go sign up for it.
Okay. Any thoughts on why the numbers are lower than what we thought?
I think Representative Dunnigan's, what he's on to there is probably true. I think the confusion that came out of session is in part the reason. I think the numbers may have been a bit inflated too over the years. We might have been estimating too much. But I think in open enrollment in November, when people are used to signing up for health insurance, we'll see a much bigger ramp up. So I'm not sure where they'll end up, but yeah, they have been a little slow.
Okay, any final thoughts on that before we move on to the next?
No, just we're open for business.
Okay, so you guys are very agreeable on that part.
We agree on everything.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's get into the part that maybe you don't agree on so much. What's next?
All right, so we had our attorneys evaluate that over the weekend, and this is what they said. You passed a law during the session, Senate Bill 96. It lays out 4 steps or 4 phases, and that's a law. You have to follow that. So we're in phase 1 now, where we're open for business. Phase 2 is to submit the per capita cap waiver to the federal government, which they indicated last weekend that they're not going to approve. We still have to submit it. That was submitted yesterday, in fact. So that waiver was submitted to the federal government yesterday, and we'll see what they say formally. They've told us informally they're not going to approve it. But what they told us is they're not going to approve the per capita cap. There are still several other waiver pieces of flexibility that we want to see what they say.
Okay, so your point is it's the law, we have to follow it. You guys say, let's get on with this.
Well, I've got an opportunity to present here. I think we can follow the law as well as go ahead and implement full expansion and stay within the letter of the law. There's nothing that I read in SB 96 that precludes the state from filing a state plan amendment, which is the simple process that's provided for in the Affordable Care Act to get Medicaid expansion. Go ahead and do that and then pursue some of these other waiver requirements kind of on a sort of parallel basis. That strategy was used in Virginia. It seemed to work very well there. And we wouldn't have to wait. We wouldn't have to spend 30 cents instead of 10 cents on the dollar in order to get this program, continue this program. And I think it's just wise. We wouldn't also have to continue freezing people out. Again, I mentioned a little earlier that we help people with enrolling in health insurance. Well, we've seen too many people who either one, found that the premiums and the cost sharing in the ACA were just too hard to make work for their families. We've also seen folks that have a health condition, they can't get into Medicaid because they make too much, but they also can't get ACA because open enrollment hasn't been open since April. So why not just do it now? Let's file that state plan amendment, get things done, and I think we'd be in good shape. We can still apply for the waiver.
Let's send that question right to you.
So we have the law that we've got to follow, whether we want to or not, and that says the next step is to start working on phase 3, which does expand it to 138% of poverty. And so we intend to start working on that. It has some other waivers in it, but that's the next step. And we're going to follow the law. We're going to do that.
So do you see any window that Matt brings up here where you can put in
it doesn't make sense to say we're going to do the state plan amendment and expand all the way to 138 and then submit a waiver to go to 138 with some waiver conditions on it. There's no point in doing that. We have to do phase 3. We have to do phase 4 and those steps unless the law is changed. And we do intend to get going on phase 3 right away. We're not going to wait and until we get the formal disapproval or denial. We're going to get going on phase 3, which expands it to 138% of poverty.
And when would that happen under the law?
Well, it has to happen by mid-March. That's
but it could
the way.
happen
It could
before.
happen earlier, yes.
Okay.
And we've talked. I met with the governor and others Monday, and we intend to get going on that.
Okay. Matt, that is the law as representative and the governor and others see it. Why not just take those steps?
Well, I think those steps are fine to take, but I think we're wasting money. And my read of the law might be a little different, but I think we can still apply for a state plan amendment. I don't think anything precludes us from going down the path of a waiver at the same time. Again, other states are doing it. And frankly, I'm a little worried about our phase 3 strategy because the Trump administration indicated they're not really supporting these hybrid waivers to continue Obamacare, which is a program that they don't support. So I'd rather just do it through the most clear means possible, the straightforward way that is provided for the Affordable Care Act, and do the state plan amendment, which would take a few months, get it done. Let's be on the path to getting people coverage, doing it in the most cost-effective way, and also do the waivers. And if we say we do need to go to special session to make that happen, again, if the Legislative Council is saying something different, then I respect them. But I think that let's look into that.
Okay, I've got 30 seconds left. I'm going to let you have the final word. Address those 2 points. One being the cost, the 70%
one thing we
versus
need
the 90%.
to keep in mind is we've got 40,000 plus Utahns in the federal marketplace between 100 and 138% of poverty. Federal government's paying all of subsidies. Once we move them on Medicaid, we have to pay 10%. That's $35 million a year state share. So there's a cost there that people don't seem to be mentioning. Secondly, the plan amendment is going to require legislation. Our health department is not going to just submit a plan amendment. I met with our director. They don't do things like that absent legislation. And so we've already got legislation on the books, and that's what we're going to do.
All right, I'm going to have to end it on that note. We could do the whole show on this. I probably should have thought of that, but I really appreciate your time, at least getting some more information out there as much as we can. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Still to come on Inside Utah Politics, we're debating political party values. How do you even define them these days, and does the average American even relate? Our panel will weigh in a little later. But first, military members and missionaries who are residents of Utah County will be able to use their cell phones to vote. More on the pilot program after the break. Welcome back. Utah County is launching a pilot program to increase voting opportunities for residents living overseas. Utah County Clerk Amelia Powers is here to explain how it works. Welcome to the show. Glad to have you with us this morning.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You bet. This is a very interesting and really could turn out to be a big deal option for helping increase opportunities. Is that what this is all about?
Yeah, this is about making voting more accessible and safer for those that are overseas during the elections.
Okay. Talk about how they vote now.
Before
the pilot program.
Before the pilot program. Before the pilot program, people overseas voted via fax, email, or snail mail ballot. So they were sending in their ballots from overseas. If they did snail mail, the timing is very hard to judge because we can't guarantee mail overseas.
Sure.
Otherwise, they're using...
I mean, you just look back to last election to see how that could have impacted that with such a tight race in the 4th Congressional District.
Exactly. Also, a lot of these voters happen to be military voters, and sometimes those overseas ballots don't even get counted unless they're statistically valid. And so we have these people that are overseas fighting to defend our freedoms, and they don't even get to vote in our elections and have their vote count unless it's a close race. This gives them the option to have their vote counted with everyone else's.
Okay, let's dig into how it works. This is actually using mobile technology.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
So it's mobile technology, but they're not actually casting their vote with their phone. It's a remote ballot marking device. So they use an app on their phone to mark a ballot, and it goes into a virtual lockbox until it's time for us to count ballots. Then that virtual lockbox is opened, and their ballot is printed off and counted as a paper ballot with everyone else's in the county.
You are a new county clerk down in Utah County. You're the only county trying this.
Yes.
What was it that made you look at this and say, you know what, we really need to give this a try?
Coming into office, I wanted to make sure that we did two things. Number one, that we upgraded the technology and the efficiency in the office, and number two, that we had secure elections. This process will make counting those ballots a lot more efficient, manpower-wise, and for the voters overseas, but it also gives them a more secure option than email or snail mail or fax to cast their vote.
Let's dig in a little more into who's eligible. You mentioned military members, but
Yes.
who else could possibly benefit from this and participate?
Anyone who's a registered voter that's currently living overseas. So someone serving a mission in another country. I myself was a UCAVA voter when I lived in Canada working for Caterpillar. My chief deputy when he was serving in the Marines was an overseas voter. So military, missionaries, and people living overseas.
And this is immediate. We're talking like next week's municipal primary election.
Yes, in fact, we've already had some ballots cast using this method since voting is open and ballots have been sent out.
Okay, and so you'll do it for the primary, you'll do it for the general.
Yes.
What about beyond that? What's the goal?
If this looks good, coming back, we're also working with the National Cybersecurity Center, and they will be doing a full audit of this for us. If we find that this is secure and that it works like it was designed to, we will absolutely use this in the 2020 election when voting is going to go up significantly in the presidential year. We'll use it for overseas voters and also disabled voters.
Would you like to see other counties, and maybe even make this a statewide thing, take a look at what you're doing and possibly have that as an option across the state?
Absolutely. We've been in contact with the Major General for the Utah National Guard, and he would love to see this as an option for all of their military serving overseas. It's much more convenient for them, and if they don't feel comfortable with it, they can still cast their ballot the old way, but for those that feel comfortable, this is a much more convenient option.
All right. Where can people learn more information on that if this sounds like it's something they'd like to take advantage of?
If they're eligible, they've already gotten an email, but for people that just want to know more, they can check our website, utahcounty.gov.
Okay, and as I mentioned, a new county clerk in this role. Tell us about the transition. How are things going?
Things are going much better than I thought they would. Been in office 6 months now, going on 7 months. And in that time, we've been able to upgrade technology and really look at our election system, expect results much quicker from Utah County than they have been in the past, and expect a process that's much more efficient and organized.
All right, Amelia Powers, Utah County Clerk, thanks so much for being with us this morning. We'll watch closely to see how this pans out.
Thank you.
You bet. Coming up, are extreme ideas ruling the day for both of the major political parties? Our panel will be weighing in on that right after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now for the Inside Utah Politics panel discussion. This week we have former Hinckley Institute Director Kirk Jowers and University of Utah Associate Professor Tim Chambliss. Gentlemen, great to have you with us. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Glenn.
Boy, a lot of talk nationwide. We have the Democrats front and center. We've seen the debates. People growing frustrated with some of the rhetoric they're beginning to hear. Let's start off with digging into this idea of extreme voices. What role are they playing on the national level? Kirk, let's start with you.
Well, unfortunately, you start with President Trump. You always vow, I'm just never going to mention his name. Let's have a discussion without him. But this question begs the question that he was elected by taking a very different tack to the presidency, different in the primary than anyone had ever taken, different than McCain or Romney had taken when they tried to defeat Barack Obama. And his worked, and there's a lot of factors into that. But this loud voice is also being seen over in Europe as well. And now you've got this Democratic field that is 20 plus, and they're scrambling to be heard, scrambling to distinguish themselves from the field. And Trump's extremist kind of ways of doing things are right now, the Sun Tzu last battle.
When you take a look at these debates, it's almost like all of them are centered on getting in that zinger so that they can stand out in some way.
And there's a reason why, because every one of the 20 plus candidates who are seeking the Democratic Party nomination believe that if he or she can get that nomination, he or she is going to be the president in 2021.
But are they beating each other up too much to getting to that point?
It's certainly combative, verbally combative. We've seen this just in the past week.
Republicans, I think, are enjoying this immensely because you have the moderates who are really taking aim and saying a lot of the things Republicans would like to say about the new Green Deal, the Medicaid for all, and education, higher education for everyone, and how that's unreasonable. And so now you've got Democrats saying that makes the argument a lot easier in the general.
As I listen to the rhetoric nationally now, and I think back to when I was growing up, 80s and 90s, things have changed so much. So I want to ask you guys this question. How do we even define party values in this country anymore? Kirk, let's start with you with the Republican Party.
Well, I think this is a difficult time to answer that question for the Republicans, probably the most difficult ever. Because
that's why I'm asking it.
So President Trump is the President of the United States, and he is a Republican. And so he is the bully pulpit. He is the standard bearer for Republicans. A lot of the policy he voices, I think, do fit comfortably within the Republican Party. I would hope the way he says it and some of the other, and the tone and everything else, the divisiveness, at times the racism and other things, it has nothing to do with the Republican Party. But if Republicans don't speak out in favor and against, when appropriate against him, he essentially becomes the voice of the Republican Party.
Tim, define the values of the Democratic Party right now.
Well, I would say the Republican Party is no longer the party of Abraham Lincoln. It's the party of Trump. And he's polling at no more than 45%. That's very problematic for Republicans as we move to the next election. The Democratic Party has been the party historically of inclusion, of accepting minorities, of being the party that welcomes, that sees diversity as a strength. Right now we see the party itself with so many candidates being quite fragmented.
Let's get your view of the Democratic Party now. What do you see their values standing out?
Right now, some of the leading candidates, with the exception of Biden, have got proposals that are so far left, and I agree with the moderates in those debates that it would have no chance to win. They think they can beat Trump. I think they've got no chance to beat Trump if you have Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. That is not where the country wants to go, no matter how radical and damaging some of Trump's rhetoric can be. The policies are what's going to follow the country. So the Democrats had better work that out, or they may be shocked yet again.
Do you agree with that? Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders would be a losing ticket?
It would probably be a losing ticket, but the ideas they're presenting are very viable ideas as we consider everything that could possibly be legislation in the future. But in order to win in this country, the American people, I think, are basically moderate to maybe even right of center. And so you need to have candidates, regardless of race or gender, who identify with the vast majority of voters in this country.
Kirk, your thoughts on that? Does the average American relate to what we're seeing at the top of both parties right now.
No, and I think the polls bear that out. I mean, Utah was pretty interesting. Only 38% of Utahns, a Republican state, support Trump's reelection right now.
And only 45% of them voted for him in 2016.
Right, and you know, you compare that to Mitt Romney winning by, I think, 48 points. So that's the difference between, you know, Trump and someone like a McCain or a Romney.
Okay, let's jump to the governor's race for 2020. It's an interesting one. Right now, only one official candidate in Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox. But a poll released by the Salt Lake Chamber during the week shows Spencer Cox slightly ahead of even a John Huntsman if he were to come run. I think they were both in the lower 30s, but had Cox ahead. What do you make of that poll?
The poll, I think, is accurate indicator, although limited with only about 800 in the sample. Lieutenant Governor Cox is in the state. He's known. He's likable. He's approachable. What we've seen with John Huntsman Jr. is that he's been away from the state for 10 years. You know, in China, in Russia, candidate for president, and so as a result, voters have a tendency to forget a little bit.
What impact does Cox being the only official candidate in the race right now have on a poll that would come out?
It's great timing for him. I mean, he's been doing the work. He's been a candidate. He's been on these shows. He's going to each and every city. 268, I believe, is the number that are incorporated cities that he is going to. So, you know, he deserves to get some points right now, but it very much is a moment in time, and if Huntsman enters, people will remember why they liked him or didn't much more clearly. And then you have names like Greg Miller and Spencer Eccles and others who would be incredibly formidable opponents. So we'll see what happens, you know, in 2 months from now when the next poll comes out, when we have a little more solid field.
So let's have former Speaker Greg Hughes, Amy Winder-Newton, local county councilwoman Thomas Wright. We're also in this poll pretty far back. Could things change, though, if they become official?
Certainly things can change, but the main two names right now are John Huntsman and the Lieutenant Governor.
What about a guy like Jeff Birmingham, who's not in yet, but he's raising tons of money right now? The last I saw, over 500,000.
He is, so he's going to have a war chest that allows him to get his name out. At the moment, I don't really see the vacuum for him to get there, particularly if someone like a Huntsman, Miller, or Eccles gets in. If it can get down to one-on-one with Spencer Cox, you know, then anything can happen because people will have to pay attention to him. But if you get one of these higher profile names, no matter how much money, it may be hard to get people's attention away from the two front runners.
He has to be considered just like Jonathan Johnson was a serious candidate back in 2016.
All right, real quick, we have about 30 seconds left, but when we're talking about the national scene and what we're seeing going on there, how might we see that in the local governor's race as well?
That's the most interesting thing I was watching from the two debates this week. There's this attack by certain members, because it's Joe Biden, who was the vice president of President Obama. President Obama has 95% approval rating among Democrats, and they're attacking some of his policies because they need to drag Biden into the scrum, and right now he's above them.
So we might see that with Cox and Herbert as well?
And that's exactly the point, is Cox may have to defend you know, his record with Herbert, as well as his vision for the future and why he didn't get that done these last, you know.
All right, I'm unfortunately out of time. Real quick.
We have no Democratic announced candidate for governor.
Yeah, that is a true point. All right, gentlemen, great conversation. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Glenn.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. Next week is the municipal primary. August 6th is the last day, that's this Tuesday, to require a mail-in ballot or to request a mail-in ballot. This Friday, August 9th, is the last day for in-person early voting in some areas. And then Election Day is set for Tuesday, August 13th. Make sure to connect with me on social media. I'd like to know what you think of this show and other issues that are important to you. Email me at InsideUtahPolitics at abc4.com. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Just log on and search Glenn Mills ABC4. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.